So I broke down and I did a Hulu subscription. I'll keep it for about a month. Added a new streaming service just for Sasquatch, the true crime Bigfoot documentary. I was like, how much are they going to expand the use of the term or loosely use use of the term true crime? But at the same time, I
Well,
really
what
want
crime has taken place here? Like, there's no
well,
crime.
at the
The
same
only
time, I
crime
really
is
want to
this
believe
that,
in Bigfoot.
yeah, the
But
only crime is not believing in Bigfoot.
that's absolutely right. But anyways, this is what it's a bait and switch. Unfortunately, I'm sad to say. It lured me in. I thought it was going to be all about Bigfoot. I thought I was going to see things that made me believe entirely in Bigfoot. But what happened is this whole story is based off of there's an investigative journalist, and he back in about 93, this guy's gone undercover with like skinhead groups and all he's been in all kinds of dangerous situations. So he was up in what they call the Emerald Triangle. So this is near Mendocino County in California and Humboldt. And then there's another one that intersects with it, but this is where all the weed farmers put out all the black market weed. And so it's a very dangerous area up in there. So he was hanging out with a friend up there, and there was a couple guys that came in that worked on the weed farms, and they said that 3 people had been murdered, and their remains had been just ripped apart, and Bigfoot was responsible for it.
Ergo,
Yeah.
Bigfoot. Bigfoot.
So
It has to be Bigfoot. Now I can see the hook here because a
yeah,
crime has taken place. People have been murdered.
yeah,
And since it was probably a Sasquatch, they can drape the true crime
absolutely,
moniker.
yeah.
They can drape the.
So
I get it. I see what they're
it's
doing.
it's stuck in this investigative journalist's head. He's like, I remember this story back in 93. I've covered all these weird stories. I've had all these bizarre experiences. But that story that those guys told me about Bigfoot killing those people in the Emerald Triangle has never left my head. I got to figure this out. So he
Mhm.
goes on this journey to talk to the locals. They cover all the Bigfoot lore. But basically, the short of it is that it shifts from a Bigfoot story to a story about the weed farmers and all the crime that exists in there and who is responsible for it.
So it goes
Uh,
from a Sasquatch, a
yeah,
potential Sasquatch movie to an actual real, like this was actually a crime, like a crime took place here.
right, like to a crime with humans as opposed to the Sasquatch, but Sasquatch being what everybody said or what he had heard was responsible for it. But it also happens in the same area where all the Sasquatch stories are and where they sell everything to the tourists. So like it happened kind of like around the Willow Creek area, which is where Patterson and Gimli took the original footage for it. And where if you go in as a tourist, you can get a Bigfoot burger and you can buy a Bigfoot print, you know, those prints that they do, like when
Mhm.
you're in school and you put your handprints on there when you're a kid and they give you those prints, you do that, but like with Bigfoot memorabilia. So there's a whole industry around Bigfoot tourism there. But then there's all these stories. So like it's a really spectacular area when you go and you look for landscapes. So all the tourists, they think it's like this peaceful area, but all the locals are like, no, this is like a super shady, dangerous area. This is also one of the places, and now Netflix did a documentary on this same area, and it was called Murder Mountain. And it was entirely about like the weed farmers and the crime and all the bodies that had disappeared, all the missing persons. And there's basically just stories like they talk to the sheriff, and the sheriff goes, it's not that we don't want to find these people. They're like all these missing persons, but nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody's too scared because they're all scared of the retaliation from the weed farmers and everything like that, because everybody's super armed up there.
Not retaliation from the Sasquatch.
Yeah, not retaliation from the, yeah, they're more afraid of the retaliation from the armed weed farmers with AK-47s they're guarding. And also the Hells Angels have a
So
huge, they guard it off in places there. And they have a big history about like the weed farmers would put up all these like booby traps when people would come in, like right around the time when the DA busted them. So it was crazy. I mean, that whole thing is like fascinating right there. But I think Murder Mountain is a much more interesting story that focuses just on the weed farmers. This one has the Bigfoot angle, but it strays away from that. What it reminded me of is it reminded me of From Dusk Till Dawn, but the reverse. So
mm,
From Dusk Till Dawn, you start out with a story about criminals, and
right.
it very much takes place in the real world. And then it shifts to a story about vampires. And then it goes into the supernatural and all kinds of crazy stuff. This does the exact opposite of that.
Mm.
So, but
Far.
yeah, they actually show some of the Patterson Gimli footage, and they talk to this is one of the kind of interesting parts of it. They talk to Gimli, and he goes, "This is all real." And then they talked to the guy who was supposedly in the suit, wearing the Bigfoot suit, where they claimed it was a hoax, and he's like, "No, they actually just paid me to get in the suit." So I was like, "Damn it!"
Well, I
They're
mean,
doing
well,
everything for me that I just wanted to believe. That I wanted to believe in Bigfoot. I wanted to hear about like the Bigfoot alien connection. I wanted to hear like Bigfoot's an interdimensional being. I wanted them to prove this to me, and I also wanted them to interview Bigfoot, but
and
none of that shit.
they failed miserably. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the like that near death one that Netflix had for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, I watched it with the intent of being like, oh, cool, man. Maybe there's some new shit in it. But they had the one story
Yeah.
about that was like, oh no, when I near died, I went off in this world, and it's like, but everything else, every other story is basically like, yeah, these just rehashing potential stuff, and nothing was actually, there's nothing new or revealing.
They're
But
using it straight up for a marketing gimmick to lure people
yeah,
in. Yeah.
well, even it was kind of funny is like I've read now this one obviously was picked up by Hulu, so it's not really like some guy self-distributing it, but I've heard when you're self-distributing, there's some keywords and key stuff that actually just perform well just by having them. True crime is one of them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And Sasquatches and Bigfoot for some reason resonate well too, because there's a big following for them.
Yeah.
So I just kind of appreciate the fact that they have both true crime and Sasquatch in the same.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome. That's what
they're
lured me.
melding it together, and they're ticking a lot of boxes. So this is like, yeah, maybe that's why Hulu picked it up, because it did have the two. It is funny, like if you do a true crime documentary or you do a story about true crime, or for some reason a Sasquatch, they do really well self-distribution, because people pick up on that for some reason.
Yeah, for sure. Unless you're the audience member and you expect to see the whole thing about Sasquatch, and then it turns out to be something else. But
yeah,
I mean,
but you've already paid for it, so
that's true. They already sucker me in.
They already suckered you in.
The good news though is that they have all kinds of. They have some pretty good like indie horror selections on Hulu. So I'll keep that for a month and watch a lot of the other cool stuff on there. So
yeah, cool. That's like
there's a movie that's all about drinking called like Another Round with Mads Mikkelsen. I'll watch that one too.